Why does a 19-year-old girl whisper an apology before pulling a trigger? The wind screamed through the mountain pass, carrying with it the smell of snow and cordite. Ara Vance lay prone on a ridge 7,000 feet above sea level, her eye burning as she stared through a cracked scope. The world had collapsed into a circle of glass. Inside that circle, a man used children as shields. Human geometry, flesh and bone positioned with calculated precision to make the shot impossible. Do not engage, Sierra 1. I repeat, do not engage. That is a civilian structure. The voice in her earpiece was clean, detached, safe in an air-conditioned room 4,000 miles away where decisions were made with PowerPoint slides and risk assessments. Negative command. I have PID on target. He's using the children as heat shields. If he reaches that ridge, Team Echo is dead. All of them. Her voice was steady, but inside something was breaking. Not fear, something deeper. Stand down, Corporal. That is a direct order. If you take that shot and miss or hit collateral, you will face court-martial before your boots touch American soil. Beside her, Master Chief Grave Miller lay bleeding into the dust. His breath came in wet, ragged gasps. Shrapnel had opened his neck, missing the carotid by millimeters. His hand gripped her ankle with fatting strength, his eyes carrying a plea he refused to speak aloud. Save them. You have 10 seconds, Vance, Miller wheezed, blood bubbling past his lips. Make the call. Her finger hovered over the trigger. The physics were impossible. A 1,200-meter shot through swirling wind with a scope held together by duct tape. The ethics were worse. One wrong calculation and a child dies. One hesitation and 6 American operators die. There is no training for this moment. No manual, no protocol. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not to command, not to Miller, but to the girl she used to be, the girl who believed in right answers. Click. 72 hours earlier, that girl still existed. The heat at Bagram Airfield was physical, oppressive, a heavy blanket that smelled of burning trash and JP-8 jet fuel. It distorted the air above the tarmac, creating shimmering pools of mirage that made distant objects dance like ghosts. For a sniper, mirage was information. For everyone else, it was just a headache. Corporal Ara Vance lay in the dust of the calibration range, her cheek welded to the stock of a Macmillan TAC-50. She was small, barely 5'4", and the massive anti-materiel rifle looked ridiculous beside her, like a child trying to play a cello. Hey, sweetie, the voice rasped behind her, dripping with condescension. You sure the recoil on that cannon isn't gonna snap your collarbone? She didn't blink, didn't move. Her world was the circular image inside her scope, a tunnel of focus that erased everything else. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. The breathing technique was meditative, mechanical. I'm talking to you, Alice. The voice belonged to Breaker Davis, lead breacher for SEAL Team Echo, a mountain of muscle and beard standing with arms crossed, flanked by 3 other Tier 1 operators. They weren't wearing helmets, baseball caps and sunglasses. The casual arrogance of men who'd forgotten what it felt like to be questioned. Leave her be, Breaker. Master Chief Grave Miller sounded tired, like a man who'd had this conversation before. Command says she's our long gun for the Hindu Kush op. Let the kid zero her weapon. She's 19, Chief. Breaker spat tobacco juice into the dust. 19. I have boots older than her, and she's supposed to cover our 6. It's a joke. Some diversity quota form got checked at the Pentagon. Ara adjusted the elevation turret. Click, click. The tactile feedback was the only thing that felt real. She could feel their eyes on her back, feel the weight of their doubt pressing down like the Afghan heat. Range is clear, the range safety officer announced over the loudspeaker. Target deck is hot, 1,000 meters, steel plate. The SEAL sniper, a lanky Texan named Tex, stepped up to his SR-25. He lay down on the mat beside her, close enough that she could smell his chewing tobacco. Don't worry, darling, I'll handle the heavy lifting. Just try not to flag us with that barrel. Crack. Tex fired. A second later, a puff of dirt kicked up 5 feet to the left of the target. Wind's weird up here, Tex grumbled, adjusting his scope. Kestrel says 5 miles per hour east, but it's pushing hard. He fired again. Another miss this time right. Variable gusts, Miller noted, frowning. It's the heat thermals coming off the runway, tricky. Ara watched the mirage. She didn't look at the flags, didn't check a Kestrel weather meter. She looked at the way the heat waves boiled through the scope. The boil wasn't moving left or right. It was lifting. A vertical updraft caused by the valley floor heating up. "Hey, Vance," Breaker laughed, the sound harsh in the dry air. "Why don't you pack it up? Tex will dial it in eventually. Save the taxpayer the ammo cost." She ignored him, closed her eyes for a split second, visualizing the bullet's flight path. The updraft would push the round high. The crosswind was a lie, a localized eddy. Physics, not luck. She opened her eyes, exhaled, paused. The trigger brake was crisp, like snapping a glass rod. Boom. The recoil of the .50 caliber slammed into her shoulder, a violent shove that she absorbed with practiced biomechanics. The concussive wave kicked up a cloud of dust, momentarily blinding the SEALs standing behind. Clang. The sound of the bullet striking steel at 1,000 meters drifted back a full 3 seconds later, faint but unmistakable. "Lucky shot," Tex muttered. Ara didn't speak. She worked the bolt, ejecting the brass casing with mechanical precision. Settled back in. Boom, clang. 2, Miller counted, his arms uncrossing. Boom, clang. 3, Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. Center mass every time. She engaged the safety and pushed herself up from the dust. Didn't smile, didn't look for approval. Just grabbed her notebook and began logging atmospheric data with the same careful attention she gave everything else. Temp 98 degrees F. Baro 25.4. Updraft 2 MOA. The SEAL team was silent. Tex stared at his kestrel, looking confused. Breaker looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. "The wind isn't pushing east," Ara said softly, her voice flat and factual. She looked directly at Tex, then at Miller. "It's a thermal updraft. If you dial windage, you'll miss every time. You need to hold under." She slung the 20-pound rifle over her shoulder as if it were a backpack, as if she'd been carrying the weight of other people's doubt her entire life. "Corporal Vance." Miller stepped into her path. The mockery was gone from his face, replaced by cold, calculating assessment. "Where did you learn to read trace like that?" "Appalachia, Master Chief," Ara replied, adjusting her cap against the sun. "Hunting groundhogs across the valley. They're smaller than insurgents, and they don't shoot back." She walked past them toward the barracks, feeling their eyes on her back. No longer scoffing, heavy with a different kind of weight. Doubt had been replaced by something more dangerous. Expectation. They expected a miracle now, and in the mountains where they were going, miracles were in short supply. The easy part was over. The shooting was just math. The war, she knew, would be entirely different. And somewhere deep in her chest, a small voice whispered a question she couldn't answer. What happens when the math stops working? The inside of an MH-47G Chinook does not smell like courage. It smells of hydraulic fluid, stale sweat, and acrid exhaust that seeps through the open ramp. It's a vibrating metal coffin designed to vomit violence onto the earth. Ara sat near the tail, knees pulled tight to her chest, trying to make herself smaller. The massive twin rotors overhead churned the air with a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that vibrated in her teeth, in her bones, erasing the world outside the fuselage. Around her, the men of Team Echo were statues of modern war. Dressed in multicam, their faces obscured by ballistic mandibles and the four-tubed spider eyes of their GPNVG-18 night vision goggles. They checked their weapons with fluid muscle memory. Breaker taped a chem light to his shoulder. Tex rechecked the seating of his magazines. They were a single organism, breathing in sync. Ara was the foreign body. "Vance," Master Chief Miller's voice crackled over the ICS, the intercommunication system cutting through the rotor noise. "When the ramp drops, you are last out. You stay on my 6. Do not deviate, do not hunt. You are luggage until I say otherwise. Copy." She pressed the push-to-talk on her chest. "Solid copy, Chief." Heat rose in her neck. Luggage. She gripped the handguard of her TAC-50. The rifle was too long for the cramped cabin, forcing her to sit awkwardly to keep the muzzle pointed at the floor. Miller was protecting her, or perhaps protecting his team from her inexperience. But by putting her in the rear, he was blinding the only person in the squad trained to see what machines missed. The crew chief, a gunner manning the M134 minigun on the starboard window, gave a thumbs up to the pilots. 2 minutes. His voice was tinny through the headset. Ara's stomach dropped as the Chinook banked hard. the G-force pressing her against the nylon webbing of the troop seat. Trained for this. Hundreds of hours of dry runs, but the training had been sterile, academic. This was different. This was the smell of fear masked by gun oil, the silence between warriors who knew some of them might not come back. 1 minute, the ramp began to lower, and with it came the night. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of pine and stone. The darkness beyond was absolute, swallowing the red glow of the tactical lights. Miller stood, hand on the overhead rail, looking back at his team. His eyes found Ara. For a moment something softened in his expression. Not pity, recognition. He'd been the new guy once, young, terrified, desperate to prove himself. Then the moment passed. 30 seconds, check your buddy. The SEALs turned to each other, running hands over gear, checking straps, ensuring nothing would rattle or snag. No one checked Ara. She was invisible again. The Chinook flared, nose up, tail down. The wheels kissed earth with a jolt that rattled Ara's spine. Go, go, go! Miller's voice was a whip crack. The SEALs moved like water, flowing down the ramp in a choreographed rush. Ara was last, just as ordered. Her boots hit Afghan soil, and immediately she was swallowed by rotor wash and dust. The brownout was complete, blinding. She ran forward, following the infrared chem light on Miller's pack, trusting it like a beacon in a storm. The Chinook's engines roared, and then it was gone, lifting into the night, leaving them in sudden, shocking silence. Ara dropped to a knee, rifle up, scanning through her scope. The night vision painted the world in shades of green, rocks, scrub brush, the skeletal remains of a Soviet-era truck. Nothing moved. Set security, Miller whispered over the radio. Vance, get up on that ridge. You've got overwatch. Finally, purpose. She moved low and fast, her smaller frame allowing her to slip between boulders that the larger operators had to go around. The ridge was a tumble of broken shale, treacherous in the dark. She climbed carefully, placing each boot with precision, the TAC-50 strapped across her back like a cross. At the top, she went prone, settling into the earth as if she'd been born there. Below, Team Echo moved in a tactical column, spread out, weapons at the ready. They were heading toward a compound half a mile distant, a cluster of mud brick buildings where intelligence said a high-value target was sleeping. Ara's job was simple: watch, warn. If things went bad, make the world stop for whoever was threatening her team. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate dropped. This was familiar. This was the groundhog hunt, scaled up. Through the scope, the world became a circle of green-tinted clarity. She watched Miller stack the team at the compound's outer wall, watched Breaker plan a breaching charge, watched the silent countdown, 3, 2, 1. The explosion was a dull crump that rolled across the valley. The wall disintegrated in a cloud of dust, and the SEALs poured through like smoke. Then the night caught fire. Muzzle flashes erupted from a building Ara hadn't been watching, a secondary structure hidden in shadow. Ambush. Contact rear, contact rear. Tex's voice screamed over the radio, the professionalism cracking under adrenaline. The distinctive crack of AK-47 split the air, answered by the deeper bark of American rifles. Ara's scope swept the compound, searching for targets, but the SEALs were moving too fast, their silhouettes blending with the enemy in a chaotic dance of violence. She couldn't shoot, couldn't risk hitting her own people. Then she saw it, a figure on a rooftop 300 meters east, the green bloom of night vision goggles, a rifle with a long barrel, sniper. He was lining up a shot on the SEALs below, picking his target with the same cold calculation she recognized in herself. Ara's crosshairs settled on his head. Exhale, pause, squeeze, boom. The recoil punched her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the figure crumple, dropping like a puppet with cut strings. Sniper down, east rooftop, she reported, her voice steady even as her hands began to shake. Good kill, Vance, Miller panted. Stay sharp. We're moving to. His words were cut off by a sound that made Ara's blood freeze. The hollow thunk of a mortar tube, then another, and another. Mortars, get to cover, someone screamed. The first round impacted 30 meters from the compound, a geyser of dirt and shrapnel. The second was closer. They were walking the rounds in, adjusting fire. The SEALs were pinned, caught in the open. Ara scanned desperately, searching for the mortar position. There, behind a low wall half a mile distant. She could see the silhouettes of men working the tubes, dropping rounds with practiced efficiency. Too far for her teammates to engage, but not for her. Her scope settled on the mortar team. She adjusted for distance, for wind, for the can of the earth. 1,200 meters at night, with targets moving behind cover. Impossible, but Miller's voice crackled in her ear, tight with pain. Vance. We need fire on those tubes, now. She didn't think, didn't calculate, just trusted the training, the instinct, the part of her brain that spoke in wind and angles. Boom, the round flew into the darkness. 4 seconds later, she saw a man beside the mortar go down. Boom, another target, boom, the mortar fire stopped. Vance, what the hell are you shooting? Breaker's voice, awed and angry at once. Mortar team, 1,200 meters, they're down. Holy static, silence. And then Miller's voice, different now, respectful. All echo elements. Vance just bought us a way out, bound back to the exfil point. Vance, cover our movement. Roger, she whispered. And as the SEALs moved through the darkness below, she watched over them like a ghost they couldn't see but could finally feel. The girl who'd been luggage had just become their guardian angel. But the night wasn't over, and deep in the mountains something worse was waiting. The kind of enemy that doesn't show up on infrared. The kind that tests not your aim, but your soul. When does a warrior become a weapon? Miller was hit before anyone saw the shooter. One moment he was bounding across open ground, the next he was on his back, blood spraying from his neck in arterial pulses that looked black through night vision. Man down, Chief is hit. Tex's voice cracked with panic, the kind of fear that spreads like wildfire through a unit. The SEALs converged on Miller, dragging him toward a shallow depression in the earth, barely cover, just a crack in the mountainside that offered concealment from whoever was hunting them. Ara watched through her scope, her heart hammering against her ribs. She scanned for the shooter, searching for muzzle flash, for movement, for anything. Nothing. Whoever had shot Miller was a professional. No second shot. No reveal. A ghost. We need CAS, Breaker was shouting into the radio. We need rotary wing, we need negative echo. The voice from the Joint Operations Center was calm, maddeningly calm. Closest air asset is 30 mics out. You are in a denied area. Recommend you move to alternate exfil. 30 minutes. Miller would bleed out in 5. Ara pushed herself up, slinging the TAC-50 across her back. She began moving down the ridge, boots sliding on loose shale, controlled falls that ate up distance. Vance, what are you doing? Miller's voice in her ear, wet and gurgling. Get back in position. You need a medic, Chief, I'm coming to you. That's a negative, you stay. A burst of machine gun fire stitched the ground near the SEAL position. The ambush was tightening, closing like a fist. Ara reached the bottom of the ridge and sprinted across open ground, her legs burning, her lungs screaming for air. Bullets cracked past her head, supersonic snaps that sounded like bullwhips. She dove behind the depression, landing hard, her rifle clattering against stone. The SEALs stared at her like she'd materialized from thin air. Miller was on his back, one of the operators pressing a wad of gauze against his neck. The blood kept coming. Pressure's not holding, the medic said, his voice tight. He's got a bleeder we can't reach. Ara crawled to Miller's side. His eyes found hers, pale blue, fatting. Damn it, Vance, he whispered. I told you to stay put. And I told you I don't take orders well, Chief. She tried to smile, but her face wouldn't cooperate. Around them, the world was falling apart. Mortars were impacting closer now, walking toward their position with mechanical precision. Automatic weapons fire raked the depression from multiple angles. They were surrounded, pinned down, and running out of time. Where's the shooter? Breaker demanded, his face streaked with Miller's blood. Where's the bastard who got the Chief? Ara's mind raced. Miller had been hit from the east, high angle, which meant she looked up at the ridgeline opposite her previous position. There, a dark slash in the rock face. A cave, maybe 30 feet up. There, she said, pointing. Natural hide, elevated position with clear sight lines. If I was hunting us, that's where I'd be. Tex raised his rifle, firing a burst at the cave entrance. The round sparked off stone. Nothing moved. He's deep, Tex said. I can't get an angle. I can, Ara said. She unslinging the TAC-50, checking the action. The scope had taken a beating during her sprint. The reticle was cracked, held together by duct tape Miller had applied back at Bagram. Vance, that's an impossible shot, Breaker said. You can't even see into the cave. I don't need to see him, she replied, her voice distant, analytical. I need to see where he'll be. She settled into a firing position, bracing the rifle against a rock. The scope's crack bisected her field of view, fragmenting the image. She adjusted her hold, breathing through the chaos of incoming fire. Inside the cave, the enemy sniper would be prone, using the depth for protection. But he'd need to expose himself to shoot. And when he did, there'd be a moment, a fraction of a second, when his muzzle broke the plane of the entrance. She waited 30 seconds, a minute. The mortars were getting closer. Miller's breathing was getting shallower. Vance, we need to move, Tex urged. We can't stay here. Wait, she whispered. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement in the cave's darkness. The faintest shift of shadow. The enemy sniper was repositioning, lining up another shot. Ara's crosshairs settled on empty air, on the place where she knew his head would appear in 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1. The muzzle flash bloomed like a flower in the cave's mouth. Boom. Her shot and his shot cracked out simultaneously, passing each other in the night. The enemy's round struck the rock inches from her head, spraying her face with stone fragments. Hers disappeared into the cave's darkness. For a moment, nothing. Then a figure tumbled out of the cave entrance, falling 30 feet and hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Holy Mary, Mother of, Tex breathed. Did you just shoot a guy you couldn't even see? Ara didn't answer. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up. She'd made a shot based on pure instinct, on predicting human behavior like she'd predicted groundhog behavior in the hills back home. 1 second slower and Miller would have taken the enemy's round in the head. 1 degree off and she'd have missed completely. We're not out yet, Breaker said, grabbing his rifle. We've still got mortars and that technical, Ara's head snapped up. Through the broken scope she could see it now. A Toyota pickup racing along the valley floor, a Sovietera DSHK heavy machine gun mounted in the bed. It was moving fast, bouncing over rough terrain, heading toward the SEAL position. The gunner in the back was already firing, long bursts that tore up the earth in geysers of dirt. That's a problem, Miller rasped, trying to sit up. That's a big problem. The technical was 2,400 meters out, moving target at night, through a cracked scope. With a rifle she'd zeroed 3 days ago in completely different atmospheric conditions. Every instructor she'd ever had would have said it was impossible. But there was Miller bleeding out. There were 6 SEALs who'd stopped seeing her as luggage and started seeing her as something else. There was the girl from Appalachia who'd learned to shoot because it was the only thing she was ever good at. Ara settled the rifle, found the technical in her fractured sight picture, led the target, adjusted for the downhill angle, for the speed of the vehicle, for the fact that she was about to attempt something insane. Light it up, Vance, Breaker said quietly. It wasn't an order, it was a prayer. She exhaled. The world went silent. Even the explosion seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat and the whisper of wind across the mountains. Boom! The rifle roared. Through the scope she watched the tracer arc across the darkness, a falling star, a prayer made of copper and lead. It seemed to hang in the air forever. Then the technical's hood exploded, the engine block taking the .50 caliber round and disintegrating. The vehicle slewed sideways, flipping over, tumbling end over end before erupting in a ball of orange flame. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the mortars had stopped, the enemy observers probably trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Vance, Miller whispered, his voice filled with something like wonder. What are you? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer, because she didn't know anymore. The girl who'd arrived at Bagram a week ago wouldn't have taken that shot. Would have questioned it, second-guessed it, waited for permission. This person, whoever she was now, didn't wait, didn't question, just acted, and that scared her more than any enemy ever could. How do you call down heaven when heaven won't answer? The mortars started again, closer now, the impacts walking toward the depression with mechanical precision. Whoever was spotting for them was good, adjusting fire based on the flame from the destroyed technical. We need air support, Tex shouted into the radio. We have a man critical. We are danger close to enemy indirect fire. We need. Echo, be advised, rotary wing is still 20 mics out. No fixed-wing assets available. You are weapons-free for personal defense only. Miller was fatting. His eyes were glassy, his skin the color of old paper. The medic had run through 3 pressure dressings, each one soaking through in seconds. "Chief, stay with me," Breaker said, his voice cracking. The big man looked lost, like a child who just realized his father could die. Ara stared at the sky. 20 minutes was a death sentence, but there was something else up there. Something the JOC didn't know about. She'd seen it during the flight in a fighter patrol, high and fast, flying racetrack patterns over the border, training mission probably. Nowhere near their AO, but close enough, maybe. "Give me the radio," she said. Breaker looked at her. "What? The radio? Give it to me, now." He handed it over, probably too shocked to argue. Ara switched frequencies, cycling through channels until she found the one she was looking for. Air-to-ground emergency freak. Any station, this is Vance, Vance, Vance. Echo element is troops in contact, grid November Victor 724589. We have 1 critical, multiple wounded, danger, close mortar fire. Request immediate close air support, how copy? Static. Long, empty static that felt like death. Then, Vance, this is Falcon 2-1. We copy your transmission. Be advised, we are not in your AO and not tasked to support your element. Recommend you contact your higher. Falcon 2-1, we don't have time for higher. We have seconds, not minutes. I'm a joint terminal attack controller, qualified forward observer. She wasn't. She'd had the basic training but never certified. And I am declaring a broken arrow situation. The radio went silent. Broken arrow was the code for a unit being overrun, for Americans about to be killed or captured. It was the nuclear option, the thing you never said unless you meant it. "Vance, say again." Pilot's voice was different now, tight, focused. "Did you say broken arrow?" "Affirm. 6 operators pinned down, 1 critical. Mortars impacting our position. We cannot move. We need ordnance on target now or we all die here." Another pause, then, "Vance, if you're lying to me, they're going to fry you." "If I'm lying to you, I'll be dead before they get the chance. Please, we need you." "Roger. Falcon 2-1 is Winchester on AMRAAMs, but we've got 2 GBU-38s. Sending coordinates now." "Can you laze the target?" Ara's heart stopped. Laze the target. She looked at her gear. She wasn't carrying a laser designator, that was specialized equipment restricted to actual JTACs. But the TAC-50 had a rail system, and in her pack, tucked away, was something Miller had given her back at Bagram. A commercial-grade laser pointer, green spectrum, powerful enough to see at night, absolutely unauthorized for combat use. "Affirm, Falcon, I can laze." She pulled out the laser, zip-tying it to the rifle's rail with shaking hands. It was ridiculous, improvised, probably wouldn't even work, but it was all she had. "Breaker," she said. "Where are those mortars firing from?" He pointed west. "Compound 2 clicks out, walled courtyard." She found it through her scope. A cluster of buildings, dark and silent, death hiding behind mud brick. Falcon 2-1. Target is a mortar position in a walled compound, grid November Victor 722587. Multiple enemy personnel. Danger close. Our position is 500 meters east. "Copy all. Vance, that's inside minimum safe distance. If we drop on that grid, you're in the frag pattern." "Understood. We'll take our chances with shrapnel over mortars. You are cleared hot." "Roger. Falcon 2-1 is in hot 30 seconds. She activated the laser, painting the compound with a wobbling green dot. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. The SEALs around her were silent, watching the sky, watching death approach from above. 20 seconds. Ara could hear it now, the scream of jet engines growing louder. 15 seconds. Another mortar impacted, close enough to shower them with dirt. Miller's eyes were closed. 10 seconds. "Please," she whispered. Not to the pilot, not to God, to the universe itself. "Please let this work." "Rifles away," the pilot called. "Time to target, 8 seconds." The GBU-38 was a 500-pound GPS-guided bomb, smart enough to hit a window from 20,000 feet, powerful enough to level a building. Ara kept the laser steady, her whole world reduced to keeping that green dot on target. The compound disappeared in a flash of white light. The shockwave hit a second later, a wall of overpressure that slammed into the depression, sucking the air from Ara's lungs. The sound was beyond sound, a physical force that rattled her bones and made her ears scream. When her vision cleared, the compound was gone, just a crater and dust and silence. The mortars had stopped. Falcon 2-1, good hit. Target destroyed. You just saved our lives. Copy, Vance. Understand you called a broken arrow. Be advised that's going to generate a lot of paperwork. Let them bury me in paperwork, Falcon. Just get us home. Roger. We're staying on station until your extract arrives. Falcon 2-1 out. Ara dropped the radio, her hands still shaking. The laser pointer had melted from the heat of the rifle barrel, the plastic dripping like candle wax. Miller's eyes opened. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. She just committed about 15 different violations of engagement rules, used unauthorized equipment, called in ordnance danger close without proper authority, lied about her qualifications, and saved every single one of their lives. Vance, he whispered, you're either the bravest person I've ever met or the craziest. She sat back against the stone, suddenly exhausted. Can it be both, Chief? For the first time since the ambush started, Miller smiled, blood on his teeth, death in his eyes, but smiling. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I guess it can. In the distance, she could hear the Chinook coming, the beautiful, terrible sound of salvation. What does respect sound like? The Chinook's rotor wash kicked up a storm of dust and debris, turning the world into a brown chaos. The ramp dropped and medics rushed out, their movements practiced and precise. They had Miller on a stretcher in seconds, IV lines going in, tourniquets checked, practiced hands working to keep death at bay. We've got him, the lead medic shouted over the rotor noise. Load everyone up, we're 60 seconds to wheels up. The SEALs moved like broken machines, limping, bleeding, but moving. Breaker had taken shrapnel in the leg. Tex's face was covered in blood from a scalp wound. 2 others were carrying a third between them. Ara was the last one up the ramp. She turned back for a moment, looking at the valley, at the burning wreckage of the technical, at the crater where the mortar position used to be, at the cave where the enemy sniper had fallen. The math of death written across the landscape. Vance, Breaker's voice cut through her thoughts. Get in. She climbed aboard and the ramp hissed shut behind her. The engines whined as the pilot pulled power, lifting the heavy bird into the sky. The vibration changed. They were airborne, they were safe. The interior was bathed in red light, the tactical glow that turned everything into a hellscape. Ara looked across the aisle. The medic was working on Miller, checking tourniquets, pushing fluids. Miller's face was gray, his eyes closed. Next to him sat Breaker, his leg bandaged, his head hanging low. And then there was Tex. He sat directly across from her. He had the TAC-50 between his knees, running his hand over the duct tape on the scope, tracing the fracture in the glass. He looked up and met her eyes. Then he did something she didn't expect. He tapped his chest, right over his heart, and nodded. A slow, solemn nod. The other SEALs saw it. They looked at her. The skepticism was gone. The mockery, the arrogance of the briefing room, all of it erased. In its place was something heavier. It was the look men give to someone who has walked through fire and come out carrying their lives in her hands. They didn't high-five, didn't cheer, didn't speak. They just stared at the 19-year-old girl who had broken the laws of physics to keep them breathing. Ara wanted to say something, wanted to ask if she did well. Wanted to ask if she'd face consequences for the laser strike, but she couldn't speak. The adrenaline crash hit her like a sledgehammer, and with it came the pain. Her shoulders screamed from the rifle's recoil. Her hands were torn and bleeding. Her ears rang from the explosions. She leaned her head back against the vibrating fuselage. A single tear leaked out, cutting a clean line through the grime on her cheek. She wasn't a girl anymore, wasn't even a soldier. She was something else now. She was the silence that comes after thunder. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 48 hours, she let the darkness take her completely. The exhaustion was absolute, pulling her down into a dreamless place where there were no targets, no calculations, no impossible choices. Just peace. But peace, she was learning, never lasts. Somewhere in that darkness, she knew what was waiting. Not gratitude, not medals, but something far more complicated. Because heroes get parades, ghosts get erased, and she'd just become both. The room was white. Not the dusty brown white of Afghan mountains, but a chemical sterile white that hurt the eyes. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the angry sound of insects, a low-frequency hum that drilled into Aura's skull. She sat on a metal folding chair, her right arm in a heavy black sling. She wore a clean utility uniform, fabric stiff with industrial detergent, smelling alien against her skin. Across the table sat Commander Sterling, a man who fought wars with PowerPoint slides and budget approvals. His uniform was impeccable, his fingernails clean. He smelled of coffee and expensive aftershave. On the table between them lay a thick file folder stamped in red ink, Top Secret NOFORN. Corporal Vance, Sterling said, tapping a pen against the file. We have reviewed the helmet cam footage from Team Echo. We have reviewed the flight logs from the F-16 sortie. And we have initial statements from Master Chief Miller. Aura said nothing. She stared at the wall behind him. Her concussion had faded to a dull headache, but the sounds of the valley, the thump of mortars, the crack of her rifle were still louder than the buzzing lights. It is an impressive account, Sterling continued, choosing words carefully. However, there are complications. The door opened. The whine of an electric wheelchair announced Miller's arrival. He looked smaller than he had in the mountains. Pale. A thick bandage wrapped around his neck where shrapnel had nicked the artery. His leg was casted, but his eyes were the same hard blue flint. "Don't sign it, Vance," Miller rasped, his voice wrecked by the injury. "Don't you sign a damn thing until they put the commendation in writing." Sterling sighed with the patience reserved for difficult children. "Master Chief, we have discussed this. The optics are problematic." "Optics?" Miller spat the word. "She saved the entire platoon. She killed a sniper at 1,200 meters. She stopped a technical at 2,400. That's a record. That is a Navy Cross minimum." "It is a political nightmare," Sterling corrected, voice dropping to a whisper. "We cannot have a press release stating that a Tier 1 SEAL element was pinned down and rescued by a 19-year-old female support attachment. It undermines the deterrence value of the unit." It embarrassed the department. Aura looked at the file, at the typed report visible upside down. Target neutralization credited to Echo Element Collective. Vehicle destruction credited to Air Support GBU-38. Sniper elimination unconfirmed. They were erasing her, not out of malice, out of bureaucratic necessity. The legend of the SEALs had to be maintained. They were the invincible demigods. They couldn't be saved by a girl from Appalachia with a duct-taped rifle. "This is horseshit," Miller growled, trying to wheel himself closer. "I will go to the Admiral, I will testify." "And if you do," Sterling said coldly, "the investigation into the Broken Arrow call will be reopened. You called Ordnance Danger Close. You violated 3 different row. If we scrutinize this, Master Chief, your pension is gone, and Corporal Vance faces court-martial for unauthorized use of a laser designator." The room went silent. The threat was naked, absolute. Miller froze. He looked at Aura, his expression crumbling. He'd been ready to sacrifice his career for her, but Sterling had just put her career on the chopping block too. Aura stood. The chair scraped loudly against linoleum. She walked to the table, picked up the pen. "Vance," Miller whispered, "you don't have to do this." She looked at him. For the first time since extraction, she smiled. It wasn't happy. It was the tired, knowing smile of a veteran. "It doesn't matter, Chief," she said softly. "It matters to me," Miller said. "I know what I did," Aura replied. "And you know and the guys know that's enough." She signed her name at the bottom of the NDA. The signature was clean, steady. Aura J. Vance, CPL. She closed the folder. "Am I dismissed, Commander?" Sterling looked surprised, relieved. He took the folder, sliding it into his briefcase. "Yes, Corporal. You are reassigned to Bagram Support Battalion effective immediately. Pending rotation back to the States." "No," Aura said. Sterling paused. "Excuse me. I don't want to go back to the States," Aura said. "I want to stay in theater. Put me on the roster for the next rotation." "Vance," Miller said, shaking his head. "Go home, go to college, get away from this." Aura looked at her reflection in the darkened window of the briefing room. She saw the girl who'd arrived a week ago, nervous, eager to please. That girl was gone, had died on the cliff ledge. The person looking back was calm, dangerous, silent. "I'm good at this," Aura said simply. "And the mountains are quiet." She turned and walked to the door, didn't salute the commander. She stopped by Miller's wheelchair, reached out with her good hand and touched his shoulder. "See you around, Grave," she whispered, using his call sign for the first time. Miller looked up at her, tears standing in his eyes. He nodded once, a salute given without a hand raised. Ara walked out. She stepped into the hallway, pushed through heavy double doors, stepped out into Afghan night. The air smelled of diesel and dust, the same smell as the valley. The runway lights stretched out into darkness, two parallel lines leading to nowhere. Somewhere out there in the dark, bad men were doing bad things. And somewhere someone needed a ghost to watch over them. She wasn't a hero. Heroes got medals, got parades. She was a needle, sharp, invisible, necessary. The mountains called to her in a language without words, a language of wind and distance and the terrible mathematics of life and death. She'd answered that call once, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would answer it again. Because some people are born for quiet rooms and gentle lives, and some are born for the places where civilization ends and the only law is the one you enforce yourself. Ara Vance had found her place, and it wasn't in the light. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in the silence between heartbeats, in the space between breath and bullet, true strength doesn't announce itself. It just is. The world would never know her name. The records would never show her shots. History would write a different story. But in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the memories of 6 men who came home when they shouldn't have, in the quiet places where warriors are forged, there she would live forever, not as a legend, but as something better, as the truth no one wanted to tell, that sometimes the smallest among us carry the heaviest weight, that sometimes the quietest voices speak the loudest truths, and that sometimes salvation doesn't come in the form you expect, it comes in the form you need. A 19-year-old girl with a broken scope and an unbreakable will, the needle that found its mark, every single time.